Welcome to the final Paris vlog, and we are starting out at Galeries Lafayette. I found this to be extremely overwhelming. It is definitely a traditional department store where every single brand has their own little boutique set up in every different area. There was a lot there, and there were so many people, but you need to walk inside this building just to see the view, because the beauty in the architecture and the dome at the center is truly just absolutely something special. That being said, there's plenty of weird fashion around there, like those shoes that Blake was truly horrified to see that something like that would be made and would exist. But we then began looking through the various clothing boutiques, which in all honesty were a bit overwhelming to me. What was great in Galeries Lafayette though is where we had lunch, which you'll see next. We went to Pan Asia for lunch, and it was very, very tasty. They were also very allergy friendly, which I thought was really neat.
For straw, but bendy. It's not so much that we don't have this in the States, it's just that no one bothers to buy them at the restaurant. So it's pretty neat whenever you see one.
The food was both very tasty and the service was very quick, so we were able to continue on our day. One of the overwhelming things in Galeries Lafayette was how much more was available in the pop-up boutique areas. For instance, this baby store had way more selection in Galeries Lafayette than they had in the actual physical store. Now we're on the shoe level. The shoe level was massive and huge. There were some reasonable options. There were sale options that were on display, but overwhelming, very large brand boutiques. The vast amount of shoes that were on display for Saint Laurent, I was so impressed with. There were more shoes on display here in Galeries Lafayette than what were at the flagship, as well as than what I have on display in the Nashville store. Same thing with Christian Louis Vuitton. Looking at Christian Louis Vuitton on Saint Honoré compared to here in Galeries Lafayette, way more selection in Galeries Lafayette. And I was just so impressed with the overwhelming amount of variety that you were able to try on in this store. That was the really nice thing about Galeries Lafayette. Also, the varieties of Joie d'Or slingbacks, I had no idea that so many different varieties in these slingbacks existed at one time. I thought that both of these white versions would make amazing, gorgeous wedding shoes if you were looking for a luxury wedding shoe. We then went across the street to the men's section of Galeries Lafayette, and there was a very large Les Tenors section for men's bags, which I was not expecting. Also, one of the weird things about Paris fashion, we saw so much Carhartt and North Face, and that is definitely not high fashion here in the United States.
I buy all my Carhartt the same place I buy all of my feed grain for my cattle.
Yeah.
They give me the coat for free.
And the men's section is set up just like the women's are, where you have all the shoes are grouped together, and then within clothing, each of the different clothing areas are divided up by boutique. And so Blake had some specific brands that he decided to go in and look at, but there were also a lot of French brands that I had not necessarily heard of before that I saw in the men's section that I didn't necessarily pick up on in the women's. So I thought that that was really interesting on how many brands that I didn't recognize in the men's department of Galeries Lafayette. And again, lots of sale signs everywhere. We were coming in, I think, towards the end of sale season probably, but still there were a lot of items that were on sale. Not necessarily many sizes left in the on sale items, but definitely a large variety of items to be seen. Once again though, this is not Blake's favorite way to shop either, and so neither one of us were overly comfortable shopping in this type of an environment. We definitely prefer going to standalone stores and forming a relationship with a client advisor there, as opposed to feeling a little bit like a goldfish in a glass bowl. We were really drawn into Tom Ford though, because Tom Ford has some amazing leather jackets, and Blake actually collects leather jackets, particularly vintage leather jackets. And so we did go in to look at some of those pieces. And after leaving Galleria's, we had to get some ice cream as we were making a very hot walk from Galleria's over to Hermes, to the flagship Hermes store. No bag luck this day, unfortunately. And then it was time for the Rue Cambon and Chanel VIP appointment that Amelia set up for us. There were some very cute dogs that were napping and sleeping while their owners shopped. And I got very excited to see the dogs along with Steph from Handbag Holic, and they were so cute and so well behaved. But I'd really wanted to try on the Chanel 25 in the smaller size. They only had the medium and only in tweed to try on. And it was a really cool bag. I just don't think that I pull it off particularly well. Lisa had fun trying on a variety of mini bags. She had on my crossbody, her crossbody, the new walk, and was just comparing all the different lengths. Lots of dilemmas, including with Deb. Deb is deciding between three.
Oh my gosh, what do we think, anybody? Help. Help.
And then the shiny bags came out. And these shiny bags, there was one here at the end, this navy one that you're about to see, that really caught my eye, but it was from 2023 and had a $23,000 price tag to it that I just do not understand. Obviously, that did not come home with me. But as you can see, I'm holding a little white Chanel bag as we got our group photo here at the stairs. So there is a little something that is going to be unboxed from the flagship Chanel store. I think this is maybe the first time that I bought something in a Chanel store. And then after Chanel, right before dinner, Blake and I ran down to the David Yurman store that opened last year in Paris just to see what it looked like. They did not have a lot on display as far as variety of pieces. However, they had pretty much any piece that you could want to see in the drawers or back in the stockroom. So if you saw something on the website that you liked, you could ask for it and they'd absolutely bring it out. You just aren't going to see a whole lot of the collection on display. Claire and I then realized that we were wearing matching shoes to dinner, and we went just down the street to a little restaurant that the rest of the group had already eaten at twice, and you can see quite a few of us are gathered for dinner, and dinner was very tasty. Blake had a steak that he said was just okay. I had some absolutely delicious crepes that you'll see here. And then after dinner, Blake and I went back to the hotel and had an early night, while the rest of the group went and had some fun at Crazy Horse. Now on Tuesday, we had our VIP Louis Vuitton appointment that started out with lunch at the Dream Cafe. And unknown to us, this was actually paid for by Louis Vuitton, and we found that out after we went to pay the bill. But I will say they were very detailed in food presentation. Like this little pat of butter, super cute. The cucumber soup with the little foam on top. The very delicate tomato madeleine that is there beside of it on top of the Louis Vuitton china. You have lunch that came out. And I've got to say, I was not overly impressed with the taste of the food. There was a weird salad. The sandwich was kind of weird that I got. The chips were actually quite delicious, however, though, that you'll see here in a minute. So I was very happy with the chips. And then I did get a cappuccino just because I thought that it was going to look really pretty. However, if we had looked at dessert prior to trying to close out our tab, we would have realized on how beautiful that the desserts are in the Louis Vuitton Dream Cafe. And I think that we all would have ordered dessert instead of all choosing to skip it, because these were absolutely gorgeous looking. And I do wish that I had gotten dessert because I did not eat much of my actual meal, so I was still a little bit hungry. But after looking at the delicious desserts that we did not get that were super finely detailed and just beautifully crafted, we then went into the gift shop area and saw the chocolates, and I did pick up some chocolates. My initial intent had been to give them to my mother, but allergy checking them found out that they all contained her allergens, and they do have a list of a lot of very even rare allergens. They have the full ingredient list that you are able to check. Also, each box comes with the ingredient list on it, so you can also scan that with Google Translate and check it for yourself. We continued on into the rest of the gift shop, which is very much Vivian and home themed. I'm not an overwhelming Vivian lover, but I do enjoy seeing the creativity that goes into these pieces. And I know that a lot of people in our group are big Vivian lovers, so for them, this was a real highlight and a lot of fun. We were supposed to have gotten to go to the Louis Vuitton house, to the museum, to the workshops at various points, but unfortunately, they are all closed during August. These sunglasses have been requested for our VIP appointment, but we were told they didn't exist in Paris.
But the sunglasses look cool. They're exceptionally heavy. And I will get a headache wearing these.
And that was very much a large theme of Louis Vuitton, was none exist in Paris, at least as far as our VIP appointment was concerned. But there were a lot that did in fact exist in other stores in Paris. So I don't know if it was that the sales associate, when she was checking, they weren't available and they became available. I don't know if she just didn't really actually check because she didn't think they'd be available, or if there's not a lot of good communication going on in their system to show things that are available. But there were a lot of neat pieces that we got to see. If you do want something small, Louis Vuitton from Paris, they do these scarves in this exclusive Paris print that could be a great souvenir to take home with you. And then we headed to Vendôme for our appointment, and I will say that the view out of the VIP suite, absolutely incredible. The VIP suite is also beside the clothing atelier, and that is where all the VIPs go to get their Louis Vuitton clothing for various events. Whenever they do these couture pieces, they will do a max of 5, never in the same color, so each of those 5 will be in individual colors, and they are all fitted there in the store. They have about 150 clients that they provide this service for to have these beautiful tailored gowns. Now, many of the pieces that we had requested did not actually end up in the VIP room, so they brought in a ton of different stock that they hoped that we would like in order to fill the space and give us options to look at in the suite. And there were some really beautiful pieces. Unfortunately, they just weren't necessarily the pieces that we were wanting to see, with a couple of exceptions. There were a lot of Meredith's pieces there, but unfortunately, of course, she was unable to make it. That being said, there's still a lot of beautifully crafted things that were on display for us to see. But since many of the pieces that we wanted weren't available, after looking at everything that was in the VIP suite, we then went downstairs, and you'll see some more footage of the rest of the boutique there. This was the one bag that I had requested that did actually make it up there. All the other pieces I requested were not available. And so here's my thoughts on that bag.
The pictures, it's normally chopped down like you would with a pillow. But where the leather is still new, it wants to come back up. I think that over time that would soften. That's interesting. And then if you switch the straps, you can have this longer shoulder option. And these can be extended, I think, so they can go crossbody.
And then I did try on the 25 P9 Speedy, which everyone says not to try on or you'll fall in love with it. I didn't fall in love with it. The Speedy is just not a bag that is meant for me, no matter how beautiful the creation is. Now, I did find this jacket and these shoes to be very beautiful, to be very elegant and ladylike. I thought that the trunk that they had them displayed on in the main store was absolutely exquisite. That being said, it wasn't exquisite enough to pay Louis Vuitton ready to wear pieces on, because I didn't think that it was special enough for that. I did think the tan dress was beautiful as well, and there were lots of beautiful capucines on display. There were quite a few pieces that I had liked on the floor that I had asked about being brought up that for one reason or another were unable to be brought up to the VIP suite. which was fine because ultimately at the end of the day, you guys know that I am not a massive Louis Vuitton fan. I'm not going to spend major money at Louis Vuitton. I was coming along much more to get to spend time with my friends, and if something happened to catch my fancy, I was happy to see that. I did try on this hat, but I felt a little bit like the Wicked Witch of the West. Now back to the VIP suite.
A Birkin 35.
Yeah.
And this is the small little baby one.
She specifically said, it's like the Hermes bag. And we're like, yeah. We get it.
And this green capucine was one that I had wanted to see, so I was glad to see it brought up from the floor for me, just to look at in a little bit more detail. Ultimately though, I don't think that the mini capucines is a bag for me, as it is lovely, but it just doesn't steal my heart the way that a bag that costs that much money should, even if I were to go and find one pre-loved. I did really like seeing a comparison between a beige and a rose gold that you'll see here. It was very interesting to see on how, even with the same detailing, the two bags with the same leather could have such different finishes and appearances. A lot of ready-to-wear clothing had been brought up for us. This one was not a particular favorite of mine, and those were just pieces that they hoped that we would like. But it was then time for Leslie to leave us, and after the appointment, I went and met up with Blake because he had found something that he was wanting to spend some of his birthday money on, and that was Oriental rugs. He found this store that he really liked a lot of pieces in, and so he wanted me to come and help decide what would look best in our home. And the man who runs the store was extremely nice, extremely helpful. He pulled out so many different rugs for us to look at and was very fair on the pricing of the rugs. I thought that this one was absolutely stunning. And he had a lot of really beautiful rugs in all different sizes and styles for you to look at. And he does go to Iran to get all of the rugs that he brings into the store. Everyone did find it a bit funny that my husband came to Paris and was going rug shopping while I was looking at bags, but he is someone who very much enjoys beautiful things for our home. The next morning, I met up with the girls for breakfast really quick before Blake and I had a little bit more shopping to do because there was one flagship store that we had not visited yet at this point in the trip, and that is YSL. So this was one of the final stores that we went to, and I was so amazed at how many exotics were just out and on display in the open with this store. They also have a private garden up on the top floor that we got to go and enjoy, and I did get to try on the baby Carino bag that I have very much fallen in love with. We then head down to Louis Vuitton because I wanted to go to the main store. I did not want to wait in line, however. And the way that you don't wait in line is that you go around the corner between where the trunk building is and the main building, and there's a side entrance. You then go explaining that you want a hot stamp done on your piece. They will send you up to the 4th floor directly, and at that point you are able to get your piece hot stamped, and then you're able to go back down into the main part of the store to do some shopping for yourself without having to wait in that big, giant, massive line, because to me, Louis Vuitton is not worth waiting 30 minutes or an hour to go into, even though I do appreciate the history of the brand. They had a lot of beautiful vintage trunks that we were able to see, so many incredible exotic pieces. I very much preferred the store on the Champs-Elysees compared to the one at Vendôme, because to me it just felt so much more Louis Vuitton. There were so many more aspects that I just found to be more special in the store. This piece in particular, if I were to have crocodile money for a bag, this would be the bag that I would get. It was unbelievably amazing and gorgeous, as well as unbelievably expensive. But one of the other fun things about this particular store is, like I said, they had a lot of trunks that were out on display in different ways, but they also still had a lot of the Murakami cherries that were on display. I don't know if any of the pieces were necessarily still available, but getting to see all of the merchandising that was there that I didn't get to see in Nashville, because Nashville didn't get much of the merchandising, was really neat. And like I said, I found this store to feel much more Louis Vuitton, to feel much more special. But by this point, I was hungry, and so we just grabbed burgers at Five Guys, and it does taste different over there than it does in the US. Also, no ice for the sodas, and the sodas were kind of warm, so that was a little bit weird and disappointing. We then went back to the hotel to rest a little bit because there was something that we wanted to do this evening that I had not gotten to do yet. And that was that we wanted to go to Notre Dame and to see the renovated interior. I particularly wanted to see it now they had been redone, as I had been there a couple of times earlier, and so I was very excited to see the changes. And so we rested for a little bit and then took a wonderful leisurely stroll to Notre Dame through some absolutely beautiful parts, because we just sort of wandered our way in the general direction to get there. If you do want to go to Notre Dame, I do highly recommend attending Mass, as you get to skip the massive long line and get to go in and experience Notre Dame the way that it should be. However, it is a little odd that there are so many people walking around while a church service is going on. Now, the next morning, the four of us who were left went out for a final breakfast at Cafe Olympia, and they had some amazingly tasting pastries in their patisserie that was right next door. So I picked up a couple of those to take with us to the airport, where I did see this super cute little Paris, France Starbucks bear, as well as this super cute Starbucks mug that I really thought about coming home with me. I also really thought about this Longchamp tote because it really impressed me in person, and I really sort of liked it much more than I was expecting. But then it was time to jump on our airplane and head home from this wonderful trip. Thank you everyone for coming along with me in my Paris vlogs. Not quite sure how many of them there have been, but thank you for coming along with me. And for those of you who have followed my channel and supported my channel, thank you. But Blake and I just finished going to Mass at Notre Dame. That was our final thing that we did here in Paris before we leave in the morning. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with us, and au revoir.